Hi, I'm Dr. Lili, and this is my pocket pediatrician. I want to start this conversation by saying that I don't make any money off of vaccinations. I work in pediatric emergency departments and pediatric urgent care, so I've actually never been paid to vaccinate a patient. A lot of times I hear people saying, well, you can't trust doctors because they make lots of money off vaccines, and they're going to be a biased source of information. Personally, I would probably be making more money if you didn't vaccinate your kids, because we have to do more workups on patients who aren't vaccinated. When children go into multi-system organ failure from influenza, or they wind up on ventilators from pertussis, then it's the emergency doctors and the critical care doctors who wind up working harder and making more money to save your children's lives. I have a lot of doctor friends. It's just kind of what happens when you spend 30,000 hours in clinical training. I've noticed that the ones who are the biggest supporters of vaccination are the doctors in pediatric critical care, pediatric emergency medicine, and pediatric infectious disease. We're the ones who are posting articles trying to raise awareness about vaccinations and how bad the consequences can be from not vaccinating your child. We're the ones who are awake at night thinking about the kids in the hospital who are fighting for their lives. So maybe it's time to listen to what we have to say. When else do you get to hear from someone who's trying to tell you something in the hopes that they don't earn your business? What I hope to do today is to share some valuable resources with you that will give you the building blocks so that you can be equipped to make the best decision for your child. Make sure you hit that little red subscribe button right down there so you don't miss out when the next video comes out as well.
When the doctor says my child has a condition, I'll learn more at my pocket pediatrician.
So I was at work on Monday night and I grabbed my phone to figure out a medication dose I was trying to calculate really quickly, and somehow a Facebook notification popped up on my phone. We were busy with a lot of patients and I didn't have time to open the article or read it. But several hours later, once I got home, I grabbed my phone, I unlocked it, and at that point, dozens of people had posted the same article. And my stomach twisted as I read about a little boy in Venezuela who had developed the acute onset of flaccid paralysis. Venezuela had successfully eradicated polio 30 years ago. I thought immediately about a very sweet professor I had in medical school. She had been paralyzed by polio as well and was wheelchair bound. When she talked to us about vaccine preventable illness and how contracting polio as a child had affected her life. This was a few years before the big anti-vaccination movement that started in 2007. That was when Jenny McCarthy had her famous interview on Oprah about how vaccines had caused autism in her son. I was a new doctor at the time, still in residency, and all of a sudden, we were getting lots and lots of questions about vaccines, and people started refusing them. This wasn't entirely new territory for me. I had a childhood friend who didn't want to vaccinate her children either. She had read a book that had been published in 1985 promoting natural living, including raw unpasteurized milk, no sugar, and no vaccines. I'm totally on board with the no sugar, but the science behind the rest of it was a little bit suspect. The Jenny McCarthy interview catapulted the anti-vaccination movement into the spotlight, and now we're seeing the consequences. I've spent the last 11 years reading an almost constant barrage of anti-vaccination materials. When I have a parent come in and tell me that they've done their research, I want to know what they've been reading. It's definitely something that parents put a lot of thought into and are not taking lightly. I used to do a lot of work in other parts of the world, like India, Ghana, Liberia, Honduras, Ecuador. I would find exhausted women walking on foot, sometimes for 2 days or longer, just to bring their baby to a clinic so that they could get the required vaccines, hoping that their baby wouldn't become one of the under 5 mortality statistics that they were so used to seeing. To them, the thought of not getting vaccinated was just as foreign as the thought of having a unicorn-themed nursery. You see, those women who would walk for days in the blazing sun, often carrying more than one child, actually had an advantage when it comes to making the decision about whether or not to vaccinate your children. What they did have was firsthand knowledge of what vaccine-preventable illnesses can do to a child. They had actually seen babies take their last breath after losing a battle with pertussis. They had witnessed children who had been paralyzed by polio begging in the streets. And so they made great sacrifices so that they could get their children to a clinic where they could actually receive the vaccines. You see, when I was pregnant, I was probably a lot more like you. I lived in an air-conditioned house, I had internet access, I had excellent prenatal care and every resource I needed. I went down that wormhole of worry with concerning articles in the middle of the night more than once. As a pediatrician who had actually witnessed the consequences of vaccine-preventable illnesses, this doesn't seem to make any sense. I shouldn't have been scared. I knew the truth about vaccines, but those articles are really, really scary. After reading article after article like that, I can totally understand how it seems like doing nothing and taking the passive response of not vaccinating your child seems like a much better decision. It's much easier to say I'll do nothing rather than inject something into your baby's skin that you think might actually harm them. I remember holding my 2-month-old's tiny thighs and watching the nurse as she quickly injected the first vaccine, and I wondered if I had made the right decision. I knew he wouldn't get autism. Those studies had been disproved time after time after time. But I wondered if he might have some sort of adverse reaction, an allergic reaction, maybe even just a fever, anything. He cried for a few seconds, I nursed him quickly, and we went on about our day and nothing changed. I'm not telling you to say, well, my 4 children got vaccinated and everything turned out great. That would be just as silly as some of the studies that started this whole debate. I just want to let you know I understand where you're coming from as a mom. Just about every mom I know tends to doubt herself a little bit. That doubt leads to insecurity, and those insecurities lead to the mommy wars and all the arguments that take place on social media and even in person sometimes. A lot of times we're really stressing ourselves out about decisions that don't wind up making a big difference in our child's life. But deciding whether or not to vaccinate your child could be one of the most important decisions that you ever make. The question here is, why are vaccines so hotly contested? Parents Magazine recently ran an article called 11 Celebrity Parents Weigh In on Vaccines. I honestly don't know why anyone would ever make a medical decision based on what a celebrity parent decided to do, but apparently some people do. So if you need to know that somebody who can look amazing on a red carpet agrees with you, take a look at these smart moms. All of these women vaccinate their children, and actually many of them are advocates for vaccination, like Amanda Peet, whose daughter got pertussis as a baby. If we look back at where this all started, Andrew Wakefield is the person who really launched this whole anti-vaccination movement. He's a former physician in the United Kingdom. Basically, he took a sample of 12 children who he was treating for autism spectrum disorders and also gastrointestinal issues. He asked all the parents if they had noticed symptoms of autism before they had their MMR or if it had happened after they had the MMR, which is the measles, mumps, and rubella vaccine. Based on what these parents remembered, he actually published a study in The Lancet, which is a very respected journal, in 1998. He stated that the MMR vaccine caused autism and should be a cause of grave concern and further study. Since that time, it's been determined that he actually falsified those results. He's been stripped of his medical license, was found guilty of dishonesty and misconduct, and 10 of his 12 co-authors have come forward and testified that the results were actually falsified in that Lancet journal. The Lancet retracted the study in 2004, but I will say that even if he hadn't falsified his results, that was a poorly designed study with a very small sample size, and it wouldn't have been valid either way. In 2013, the American Academy of Pediatrics put together a really amazing publication. What they did was basically create a table summarizing every single study that had been done on vaccine safety all over the world. Compared with Wakefield's sample size of 12 patients, some of these studies included more than 500,000 patients. If you're truly concerned about vaccine safety, I strongly encourage you to take a look at this document. You can just read the summary of each of the 45 studies, or you can actually click on the links and read the original articles yourself and see what the science shows. Basically, there hasn't been a single study that's been able to link autism to any vaccination, preservative, or a number of vaccinations. If you're not sure, please check out autismspeaks.org. Click the link available on my website, in which they cite a very powerful study, which is a meta-analysis of over 1.2 million children. This analysis was able to show that vaccines don't cause autism and that the MMR may actually reduce the risk of autism in children. If any study had ever shown that vaccinations actually cause autism, don't you think autismspeaks.org would be out there shouting it from the rooftops? Instead, they're actually promoting vaccinations since their mission is to advocate for children with autism. Part of their advocacy is ensuring that children with autism don't die of vaccine-preventable illnesses. Right now, on any vaccine, the risk of a serious allergic reaction is estimated to be about 1 in a million. That's much smaller than the risk for antibiotics and other medications that we give regularly without a thought. We recommend vaccines because we've devoted years and years of our lives to studying medicine and reviewing scientific literature. Actually, we know that vaccines save lives. Polio is still endemic in many countries, including Afghanistan, Pakistan, and many countries in sub-Saharan Africa. All it takes is one traveler to slip through the cracks. And if our vaccination rates aren't high enough to provide herd immunity, we could have a public health crisis on our hands. I have a whole lot more to say about vaccines, and I'd love to answer any questions that you have. Please ask them down below, and don't forget to hit that little red subscribe button in the bottom right so that you don't miss out on any new content. This is Dr. Lili with My Pocket Pediatrician. Thanks for stopping by.
When the doctor says my child has a condition, I'll learn more at My Pocket Pediatrician.